Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. Are you looking to better your financial situation by increasing your cash flow? Too busy to hunt for real estate deals or don't know where to start? Then you're in the right spot. Join us as we dive in and talk about investing for cash flow using multifamily real estate.
Welcome to the Cashflow Project podcast. I'm your host, Steve Fierros with Tri-City Equity Group. Excited, we've got James Alexander on the show. James joins Ed. He's from Edge Financial Advisors. He joined there in 2019 to pursue his passion for helping his clients meet their financial goals. He's not just a financial planner, or he's a wealth advisor. So he's providing customized investment management and complex financial planning to families and individuals. I know it's not fix and flip, but this, I got to tell you, once you start to get successful in your fix and flip business or your short-term rentals or whatever, you're going to need to talk to somebody like James as you continue to build and develop your wealth. You can really help to set up a roadmap so that you can maximize what it is that you're doing. So prior to joining Edge, James worked in several roles within TD Ameritrade and Scottrade. So he's definitely got the background with the bigger platforms. So there he provided advisory services to clients and managed junior staff. He's got degrees in finance and mathematics from Loyola University in Chicago, and he's currently lives in Chicago with his wife and their young son, Theo. James, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you hopping on, and I know our audience is going to get a lot of value out of the show and the podcast, so definitely excited to have you on. It's an exciting time, too, because we're post-election. I know that was a big deal, obviously, for the country and for a lot of people as business owners, as investors. This is the kind of stuff, even if you're not political, right? Like, it doesn't matter kind of what side of the aisle that you're on. We need to be keyed in on certain things that happen with administrations. And so it is an exciting time. We're going to have some clarity now kind of moving forward. Give us a little bit of your backstory. How did you get started in finance and doing wealth advisement and all of that? Was this something your parents did, or was this, you always had a dream of, you know what, I'm going to help other people develop roadmaps for financial success? Or how did you get going?
Sure. Yes, that was actually not the original intent, was to be a financial advisor and roll up my sleeves and dig into all this stuff. Way back when I went to Loyola University of Chicago, my intent was actually to be a math professor. I loved teaching and I loved numbers. I'm a left brain guy. Most people are shocked when they hear me say that because I talk so much, but I'm a left brain guy. And I even played chess growing up, and there's a lot of parallels in the game of chess with the finance world that we can certainly talk about later, especially with those listening and all these pieces of the puzzle and how do they work well together. But nonetheless, I wanted to be a math professor, and I quickly realized if I didn't enjoy it, there's not a lot of fallback options in that. You can be a statistician, but again, I wanted to be heavily involved working with people and helping them. And so fast forward a couple of years, I got my finance degree. Once I started learning that, absolutely fell in love with it. I view this money game as a math equation in a nutshell. What levers can we pull? What pieces to this puzzle can we tap into to maximize what we want to accomplish in life? And so I was fortunate to get a job at Scottrade. They don't exist anymore, but for those who remembered Scottrade, they were the helicopter commercial that would advertise the $7 trades. And it was a great business model at the time. What I learned was Scottrade, no fault of their own, there were plenty others that did this. It was almost like opening up a casino online if you didn't know what you were doing. But it's so cheap to trade, so I'll just throw $1,000 over here, 500 over here, and just see what happens. And I got my neighbor telling me how great things are. Well, there's no limitations on how much you can invest and trade, right? And so you have someone who's very successful in their business, understanding that, and they're saying, well, gosh, I made all this money on this side. Let's throw $50,000 at this stock that my neighbor told me about. Well, that is where problems come into play. And so I experienced that so early on within the trading model that we had. These are self-directed clients that we just help buy and sell things. And so I was really more of a stockbroker than anything else, just buying and selling for people. And that's how I came to where I am today. Is I vowed to myself early on in my career that I want to make sure that people that want to work with me don't make mistakes with their money, that are able to optimize their hard-earned wealth within the rules of the game. Let's maximize things so that maybe I can retire 5 years earlier than I ever thought could happen. Or maybe I can have that second home that I thought was impossible 5 years ago because of just rules of the road and things that we can play. So that's how I came to be where I am today, and fortunate to say I absolutely love it.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. And actually, I appreciate that your kind of takeaway was, look, this whole thing is just a math equation, because that's true, right? You have input, you have a set goal that you're trying to achieve, let's say financially, where you can kind of help map that out. And it's like, okay, well, if you want X amount of dollars by X year, guess what? We need an X set amount, we need this kind of return over this year, let's say your working career or whatever that looks like for them, right? Whatever their timeline is, right? And so that is an equation that you can work out. And coming from a math background, you're like, dude, this is, yeah, of course. Like,
Right.
well,
On that note, because I think you brought up a really good point, Steve, is it is definitely just an equation. It's not a linear equation, because so many people think I'm going to have a rate of return of 8% no matter what. Well, that's not how the stock market works. It doesn't, it averages 10, 11, but that's not every given year. And so where people get into trouble, again, no fault of our own, I want to be clear about that. We just know we're not educated on this, is they'll say, they'll use it linearly and then say, I'm fine no matter what. And sometimes that's the case, sometimes that's not. But also, because it's not linear, I get questions from people, speaking of our recent election, what about taxes? How are those going to change? How's that going to impact me, right? What if inflation creeps back? How's that going to impact me? All these unknowns, right? That's the future. And that's the beauty of it, the excitement, but the anxiousness part of it. And so we can pull certain levers, and that's where I really can geek out. I won't spend time talking about that here, but I can geek out on those what if scenarios. And that's where peace of mind, once you feel like, okay, if all these are in place, and even if all these turn negative for us, we're still okay, then we can breathe, we can relax. So
yeah. No, actually, it probably is actually beneficial, I think, to spend some time on that, because I feel like the economic environment that we live in is so different than, say, our parents, right? We do not live in the same type of environment that say, hey, you know what, mom and dad, maybe they, went to work you had a pension, you stayed at the same job for 30 years or whatever, and you retired and kind of settled off into the sunset. There's been a lot of change in the last several decades that honestly, I think have disrupted probably a lot of traditional planning. So I'd like to get your take on, all right, how do you see that now? We do have so many people now, people that are, maybe they're at one particular job for a couple of years and they're kind of bouncing around, maybe a little bit more, I think, honestly, than people ever did in the past. I would just be curious to get your take on kind of what are the pitfalls that you see, and what are the challenges that you're seeing for most people that are looking to set themselves up for financial security down the road.
Absolutely. No, you hit that perfectly. I actually don't think I would have a job if the 50s and 60s and 70s still existed in the financial part of the world, because yes, you're right. Dad worked from 8 to 5, came home, didn't have to worry a lot about savings or Social Security and pensions. And it was going to pay you a stream of income for the rest of your life, as long as those companies were solvent and the government existed, right? And so there wasn't a lot of thought process on that. Here's the silver lining that I've learned from working with so many clients is your retirement age was set. The pension started at a certain time and Social Security paid out at a certain time. And so unless you socked away your own money, which the middle class was healthier back then, but you were still a lot more middle class than wealthy. And so it was hard for people to just set this money aside. But unless you did that, you were retiring in your 60s, no matter what. And so now it's created this phenomenal opportunity, yet a challenge of the game has changed. I'm on my own. I need to own my financial security. And there's so many moving parts. To your point, people are switching jobs more because they have different passions, and the cost of living has gone up higher than salaries have, and all these components, right? And so it's a puzzle. And in a nutshell, what I can tell people is, look, let's dumb it down is probably the best way to put it. Ignore what you have going on in your life right now and just think about what you want your future to look like. We write all that down. The key with writing it down, there's a phenomenal study on this, is I think it was the Harvard School of Business. They said, okay, does everyone have goals? And everyone raised their hand that was graduating Harvard. Who doesn't, right? They said, how many people have these goals have you actually written down? It was 5% or so have actually written it down and looked at it and revisited it, et cetera. And they fast forward 10 years after these graduates graduated, and that 5% that wrote it down had 4 times as much net worth, were so much more successful because they were clear in the picture. And so that's the first item, is be very clear to yourself. And the reason I tell people to ignore what you have going on is don't let it derail what you want in life. This is the time to just clear it all out. And so based on those goals, then My job is to look at lay out all the cards. What do you have going on? And provide some advice on taxes, on investments, on insurance, on all these items. And probably the number one most important piece that I can tell this audience listening within this planning is please make sure to account for room for error.
Mm-hmm.
Room for error is so important. I have seen people make fortunes and lose fortunes through no fault of their own, dumb luck. The CEO died that I was working for, and therefore infrastructure changes, or the rental properties I had, this happened. And so accounting for room for error, that's where people actually maintain wealth, is when they do that. So long-winded answer to your question. I can talk more about it, but hopefully that helps the audience listening.
That's actually perfect. And for the listening audience, if you guys are finding value, make sure that you like and subscribe and recommend the channel. But no, I was going to say, I'm kind of a tactile guy. Like right here, notepad, pen and paper. Our listeners, if you're not driving and you're in a position where you can safely write down, go ahead and do that. If you have not written down your goals, just to James's point, make sure that that's something that you're doing. You are infinitely more likely to achieve those goals. Just like I said, even talking about Harvard grads, right? It doesn't matter. If you want to, everybody can cast a vision for what they would like to see in the future. But guess what? If you're not writing it down, there's no way that you can implement, right? I got it in my head.
You're not intentional anymore, right?
Right.
So it becomes part of the rat race and you forget about it.
And the amount of information, guys, that we're receiving on any given day, guess what? Hey man, I've got some great picture of myself on a beach, wherever, maybe here in Hawaii. But guess what? That gets drowned out because there's so much noise. If you just only have those goals in your head, like there's so much competition for your mind space now, like it's ridiculous. So write down the goals so that you can start to implement a plan, or you sit down with somebody like James where it's like, okay, hey, look, I do have these goals written down. All right, well, perfect. We can put together a roadmap. We can help find some way to start implementing these. Then these are going to be some potential pitfalls, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, you got to start with writing it down. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for reminding people that it's so vital to do that.
Absolutely.
Well, I honestly think people should be able to get more excited about that, because it really is a great opportunity to cast vision, where it's like, all right, I used to kind of think that some of this was hokey, like vision boards and goal writing and that kind of stuff. But guys, it's incredibly powerful. It really, really is. Like, cast a big vision for what it is that you would like to see for yourself, right? And again, we're in this kind of unique period of time where we talked a little bit about it earlier, where, all right, mom and dad did sit down and they had jobs where they had pensions. It comes with a dual-edged sword now that we're in a different kind of economic environment. Before, hey, you worked 30 years, you knew, all right, I'm going to retire in my 60s because I have now enough money in my retirement accounts to kind of ride off into the sunset. It's different now. There's fewer jobs that have that. We have a lot more volatility in the market in general. And so you have this dual-edged sword where, okay, I can't necessarily rely on that same job for the next 30 years to have my pension, et cetera. But that means I can also really ramp up my activity, ramp up my investments, ramp up my input. So, hey, if I have the potential to retire 15 years early or 20 years early or 10 years or whatever, right? You can do that. So it's a bit of a dual-edged sword, but again, you can write that down, right? So map it out, have a big vision for what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your life, and start putting pen to paper so you can develop a plan to do it.
Oh, so true. I have people who retire in their 40s, and I have people in their late 70s who are still working. Those people in the late 70s, let's take a step back too. Some of these people are still working. It's by choice. They enjoy it. It's a sense of identity and purpose. Sometimes it is because of financial need, but wide scope now. And so the analogy I use for this, going back to the 50s, 60s, 70s up until now, and if you think about this, especially with the news headlines and noise, is so you write down your goals, you're creating a roadmap for yourself. So picture a roadmap, and you're driving from, well, I can't drive to Hawaii. Unfortunately, I guess I could take a boat at some point, but driving from where I am located in Chicago, say to California, to get on an airplane to go to Hawaii and come visit you, Steve. So I want to map out what the action items I need to take. I got a pension that's paying me out at 65, and that's it. Now I can map out, I can account for traffic, I can account for weather, but all these distractions are going to come my way. And so the problem that people come into play now is they get distracted by that and they get off the road. And that's the analogy, is don't get off the road towards your goals, even if something happens that you don't like, right? with the political environment, with the economic environment, with a job that happened. Yes, you might have to adjust and change lanes and shift things, but stay on the road. And those people that stay on the road are the ones that are successful. It did shut down for a period of time, but those people that sold out are regretting it now. And so it's those type of things that when we write it down, we're laser focused. And the neighbor who's bragging about his stock that he made $100,000 on, he's playing a different game than you. That's not your game, you know?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Now, I know you guys use something quite a bit, and this may be applicable for those people that are trying to structure something different and trying to be focused on what it is that they're doing. I know you guys have a benefit plan that you use quite a bit. Want to dive into some of the nuts and bolts and give maybe some of our listeners something a little bit more strategic. Now, obviously, of course, it's not going to be something you can just pull off the shelf. You do want guidance on when you're pursuing different strategies. This is why it is important to sit down with somebody like James to help develop that roadmap. But give us some background on some of the tools, some of the plans that people can start implementing and start using.
There's a new school pension plan that business owners can create for their businesses. They have to follow a couple of rules of the road that I won't get into today, but it's not that complicated on these rules. It shouldn't be an obstacle for you. But what you can actually do for those that are earning higher income and have realized, I want to save money for my future, but I don't want to just put it in an after-tax account. I actually want to take some chips off the table while still allowing it to grow and receive a massive tax benefit. That's the kicker, is I want to receive a massive tax benefit by doing this. What you can do is you can create a new school pension plan called a defined benefit plan. What it is you create a period of time that you're going to retire. You don't have to retire during that period of time, but you create an age. It can be as early as 62, like the pension plans were, all the way into your 70s. And there's a max dollar amount that you can you pick to receive at that given time. So we'll use an example of $3 million at 62. Well, if you are 55 years old and you are just starting this plan for your rental property that you're paying yourself for, you have 7 years to go from 0 to $3 million, accounting for growth. That requires substantial contributions into this plan each and every year. And so it might be $300,000 a year. Well, what's the benefit of someone doing that? You can write it off the business income, that $300,000, and that money is your money. And so I wanted to bring this to light as one item for a tax saving strategy because I'm making such good money and I'm socking away $300,000 a year. Well, if I pay 40% total tax between federal and state, that's $120,000 that I get back in my pocket. And so that defined benefit plan is one of the legal rules that can actually, it's kind of like the gift that the IRS is giving back to you. It's a legal rule if you qualify that can allow you to really take advantage of these rules of the game. And so there's so many more, but I wanted to bring that one to light because that's the most impactful.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think this is one of those ones, right? This is like, I know, coming out of political season, it's always a key talking point. It's, oh, well, people don't pay their taxes. And it's like, well, look, there's a lot written into the tax code that you said it just perfectly right then and there. You have to understand the rules of the game, right? There's a lot that's already written into the code, like for our benefit, right? And so you have to be able to understand what's there and learn how to play by those rules, right? Most people, if you're, let's say you're a W-2, guess what? All of your fellow coworkers and everybody else, they're all W-2s as well, right? So the tax situation is going to be so much simpler, but there's a lot of different levers that you can pull through business, through investments, and like strategies like James is talking about, where again, they're all in the code. It's just that you, like your friends and maybe the people that are around you are not, and your parents who were at the same job for 30 years and whatever, again, they didn't have necessarily a need for any of that, or they didn't have an application for their immediate need that would work for something like that. But there's a lot written into the code that is, again, that's the rules of the game. So if we want to learn how to win the game, guess what? We got to know some of those rules, or know somebody that does. Somebody like James, who was like, okay, hey, these are some rules, or maybe there's some tweaks that just came out or some modifications to the existing rule set or whatever. We need to stay on top of that, right? That's into your interest, your best interest. If you're not putting any attention towards that, you might pass go, but you ain't collecting $200.
That's right. Exactly. It's a different skill set too. And so when you're a business owner, especially, and you've got that phenomenal skill set of earning money, it's very different than maximizing and optimizing what you've saved and what you'll be able to put away towards your future. And so they don't teach us in schools. And so it's on us to learn it or find people who know it, who are acting in our best interest to help us with it.
Yep, 100%. Now, I love that you actually mentioned earlier that you enjoyed chess, right? It'd be like, okay, for those of you guys that are familiar with chess, ideally, if you have never played chess, go play chess. Okay, have a pawn. Okay, well, guess what? The pawn can move forward. He moves one step at a time. And if that's the only way you know how to play the game and you never understand, well, geez, I've got a queen, I've got a rook, and I've got a knights, and all of these guys have these completely different skill sets that make them incredibly more powerful than a pawn. Well, guess what? If all you know how to do is, all right, well, I'm just going to take one step forward. I can only move at the pawn speed and the pawns with the pawn skill set. I can tell you the game's not going to be anywhere near as fun.
And you probably won't win. Exactly.
You probably won't win. So very cool. What kind of challenges are you seeing right now for people as we're kind of rounding out to the end of the year? People are looking to set themselves up, or we're going into 2025. They want to set themselves up for success. What are some things that people can start gearing up for or position themselves so that they can have, you know what, I want to start my year up strong. What kind of steps can I take even just like right now?
Yeah, no, great question. I would say this will continue to be the case. It'll be all over the news headline, especially with our new political environment moving forward. We talk a lot of changes, and the news is in business to create drama because it drives eyeballs. What can people do? Try to ignore that. Be aware of what these rules are, but do not let it get to you emotionally. And I'm not a therapist. Often you'll find it's very little. But the other piece that you'll probably hear over the news over the next several months is this upcoming recession that we're bound to have. I can guarantee you over the course of our life, there will be many more recessions. If you're young enough, there'll be many more recessions. That's a fact. What can people do if that were to happen? But if you think it will happen, and you want to be careful about it, is some of the easy steps to make is have enough reserves for where, God forbid, the fixed income that you're relying on that goes away, or your investment portfolio that you're needing to take income from, whatever the case may be. People move out of rental properties and you have to replace them for a longer period of time because of a recession. Just have reserves in your bank. I can't tell you how much peace of mind that has. Number two is make sure you have an understanding on how your net worth over time. It's not how I need to get to a certain chunk of money. This is, I need to get to a certain stream of income so that I can live the life I want to live and never have to worry about money. But in order to get that income, you need to have assets to provide that income. And so write down all that and have goals around what I want that to be in 2 years, in 4 years, in 6 years. And then further under that is, what steps do I need to take? And that may require some sacrifice, but what steps do I need to take to get there? Because the number one thing that I've learned from people working with in all walks of life is the last thing we want to have is regret later in life. Breaks my heart when people say, gosh, I really wish I took that risk on this, or I really wish I did this at this stage because I was just too scared, or whatever the case may be. So probably the fourth and final point is take that chance. If you account for room for error and you've done your homework and you've understood how this could look, take that chance on yourself. Bet on yourself. So
yeah, no, for sure. I love that. And that's key. For one, I don't think we can ever stop skill building, for one, like bet on yourself for sure. Okay, maybe you do enjoy your job. You're like, Steve, James, I enjoy what I do. I do have a pretty good account set up through my work. And you're one of those people who does have, okay, maybe a pension and that kind of deal. And guess what? We can always learn. We can always get better. We can always do better to increase our quality of life. Because maybe it's not even hey, I'm going to live on a yacht or something or whatever. That's fine. I mean, if that's not your goal, that's great. But you can still get skill build. I can tell you, there's something about continue to learn and continuing to apply yourself, right? You may find, wow, and had no clue that I even had a desire to want to do this, right? So taking that bet on yourself and kind of stepping out of your comfort zone, I think is always key. So I love that. Very good. Very good practical advice.
Yeah,
right
easier said than done sometimes, but it's powerful once you realize how I have this extra skill set, and now I can do this with that and that with that. And gosh, I add more value to the world. I mean, that's what a lot of people that I work with that are much older in life is they want to make sure they made an impact on this world. And so that's the first way to do it.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I know you mentioned earlier that you wanted to be a teacher. when you're first starting out. James also has his own show. So tell us a little bit about your podcast and how people can kind of find you on there as well.
Certainly, certainly. So we have a tongue twister name for our episode. It's called our podcast series. It's called Ed's Edge. So Ed Meek is the co-founder and my partner here at the company, and Edge Financial Advisors is the name of our firm. So it's called Ed's Edge. You can find it over Apple Podcasts, Google, what have you. And Ed and I go back and forth on financial topics that simply can't be Googled, can't be easily looked up, because we realized, let alone 10 years ago, is a lot of these things can be looked up. But when we find out the formulas and the math, we still have to be motivated to take action and execute on these to accomplish what we want. And so we put a little spin on it. We interview people as well around their experiences with certain areas of this financial world and all the complications. Or Ed and I just go back and forth, poking fun at each other and talking about this fun financial life that we're living. So yes, you can find it on that or on our website, edgefa.com.
Right on. Very cool. Well, James, this is a part of our show where we transition to what we call our fire round. Just a little bit more brief Q&A. Is that something you're up for?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. First question. What is your favorite book recommendation other than, for a lot of us in the real estate world, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? But
yeah,
what would you recommend?
My latest go-to, very profound for me at the time I read it in 2020. It's called The Psychology of Money. It's by Morgan Housel. He has so many good chapters in there. The best part about that book, for those that aren't big book readers, is every chapter is independent of one another. So you don't have to read it start to finish. He talks about a lot of concepts that apply to every area of our life, not just the finance world. Very profound. Psychology too.
Psychology of Money. Yeah, and that's a huge deal too. Check out the book.
Yeah. It's very well written. He's a great guy.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, next question. What would you consider your superpower to be?
A superpower. That is a good question. I would say the ability that I'd like to say I have of making the complex simple. Hopefully that's a superpower. It's hard to do sometimes, but yeah, with all the nerdiness that I have and geeking out on certain games and the finances, it doesn't mean anything if the person I'm talking to doesn't understand it. And so it's one thing to know it, it's another thing to teach it. And so, yeah, if I were to pick one, I'd say that'd be it.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it is a superpower because there's a lot of people who can take a simple concept, go the other way, and they make it more complicated than it needs to be. If you could go back in time and visit your 20-year-old self, what advice would you have for him?
My 20-year-old self, I would say invest in my physical health earlier. Physical health. That's probably, in my personal opinion, that is the one thing that's most important when it comes to overall health, is physical health, because it ties to mental health, which they're tied together, right? Mental and physical tied together. But a lot of people worry about money. I think the Dalai Lama said that quote of, he gets so confused that men sacrifice their health for money and then sacrifice money later on for health. Is I would have told myself, one less beer at 20, James, you'll be okay.
No, you're right though, because I'm on a little bit of a health journey myself recently, and health is wealth. I think you and I both kind of live in this world where, hey, everybody talks about money. Our day is spent on, okay, how can we help you build wealth? What's the next strategy and the next steps that we need to take in order to build wealth? But it's like, yeah, but guess what? Wealth is not just financial, right?
So
what good is the wealth if you don't have health to enjoy it? So
I'm going to digress for just 30 seconds. Would you trade places with Warren Buffett? And we pose the question, everyone. He's what, the third or fourth richest guy in the world right now? Would you trade places with him? Because he's in his 90s. And so let's enjoy what we have. It's not just about the money. It's fuel to get us what we want.
Yep. No, 100%. It's just a part of the journey that a lot of us can sacrifice in the pursuit of building up our financial portfolio or financial wealth. And it's like, well, don't lose sight of the fact that, hey, take care of yourself too, right? Go out, get some sunshine. Well, if you're not in a place where you can enjoy the sunshine all the time, like I get it, but hop on the treadmill or something for yourself, right? Eat better, drink some more water, or there's a lot of different things, little tweaks that you can do here and there to focus on that as well. So no, I love that. Great advice. Yeah, appreciate that. Well, if our audience wants to get in touch with you, obviously they can check out the podcast. How can they find out more about your company, or if they want to get in touch with you and start putting together some kind of a game plan for their financial future? What's the best way for them to do that?
Certainly. The best way is directly through our website. So it's edgefa.com. That's EDGEFA.com for Edge Financial Advisors. I'm right there. There's a contact me. I'm happy to give out my work email as well. It's james@edgefa.com. So would love to have that conversation for any of those that are trying to figure out this financial game. Happy to help.
Awesome. Well, James, I really appreciate you hopping on with me and providing value for the listeners. We'll have to circle back with you and see next year maybe to see if anything's changed in the tax world, the planning, financial planning world, anything that we can all take advantage of. But no, I really appreciate you taking time out of your day and coming on with me.
Thanks again for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Great conversation with James Alexander with Edge Financial. That's a great conversation with James in terms of, hey, you know what, put together a plan, right? Like he works with people all day long in terms of financial advisement and wealth management, that kind of deal. Well, key takeaways there for sure. Write down your goals, right? If that's not something that you've done, if you think that that's hokey, if you think that it doesn't work, it absolutely works. So if you want to map out a big future for yourself, even just as simple as like, hey, where do I see myself in 5 years? Where do I see myself in 10 years? Like, what kind of retirement would you like to have? And be specific. Start writing that down. It will be infinitely more possible for you, and that you do end up achieving that if you start writing that down. So that's a very, very tactical, very practical point of advice. Leave yourself room for error in there as well. Make sure that you have a little extra liquidity, right? Some extra cash on hand, or, lines of credit or whatever, just some way to keep yourself liquid, give yourself some room for error as you go about your journey, right? But if you guys want to get in touch with James, click on the show note. We'll leave a link down to him over at Edge Financial, and you can reach out and touch base with him. Guys, if you're interested in investing with us, go to tricity.com, tricityequity.com. You can learn more about our projects, current projects, what we've got on the table. We'd love to be able to connect with you, help you along your journey in terms of investing in real estate. If you're here in Hawaii, if you're going to be visiting, we've had people come out and do that. Hey, I'm on vacation and I want to connect with some other real estate investors locally. You could do that. Reach out to us. We're glad to connect with you. We've got a group that meets every month. Lots of great people. They come out there. They're looking to level up their game. They're just looking to surround themselves with people who are like-minded in terms of achieving financial success. So make sure that you're making plans to be there. And then, of course, if you guys are finding value with the show, subscribe for one, but leave us a 5-star review depending on the platform that you're listening to. Share the episode, share the show. We'd love to continue to grow the show. So we'd love your help in doing that. All right, guys, that's going to be it for today. See you guys soon. Aloha.